Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a very special episode of the Lone Wolves Club podcast. I'm here with my friend Elena, who you may remember. She joined me and my friends Tommy and Tyler for a very honest and open conversation about how to love people in the LGBTQ plus community. Tommy and Tyler shared their stories of growing up as gay men who also love God, and they kind of unpacked a lot of the myths around being gay, but also loving God. So if you want to go back and listen to that episode, I highly recommend it. And Elena joined us on that episode to share her story of Tyler coming out to her, and she gave her perspective on how to love your friend when they come out to you or share something really special and really important like that. But Elena has a lot of her own stories to tell. She is someone who has lived many lifetimes within one lifetime. And Elena has just experienced so many things that I think a lot of Christians struggle with, but are maybe ashamed to talk about. So if you feel alone in certain struggles, if you feel like no one will understand what you've gone through, the mistakes that you think you've made, this episode is for you. I hope that you find a lot of hope and healing and encouragement in Elena's stories, from someone who has been it all, done it all, seen it all, to someone who still loves God and is on an amazing path forward in her life. So if God can do the same for Elena, he can do the same for you. So I'm just going to kick it over to Elena to kind of open up and to share her story with us and what she's learned.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me on. I don't even know where to start. So yeah, I grew up in a Christian household. Parents love Jesus. I have 3 older brothers who are wonderful. I was in the church. I understood who God and Jesus was and the importance of it. And then some stuff went down in my family, and I got kind of confused by a lot of things about how kind God is and why would he let this happen, and, all of those questions. And then in high school, I found my love of partying.
How did you get into that? Was there like a particular friend who was kind of like a partier?
It was our group. We had quite a large group, and most of them I'm still friends with to this day. But we, my best friend, her brother was older, so we got to go to the older party.
Oh,
right. We got to.
So you felt like special?
Yeah, we felt super cool. So, and at home, my dad traveled for work Monday through Thursday, or sometimes Monday through Friday. And my mom has fibromyalgia, so it's a chronic pain disease that affects your whole body. And so mom was in bed a lot. There's stuff going on with my brothers, and so I didn't feel super secure at home. And I think that's kind of why I leaned into the partying and the friends and that kind of stuff. Definitely rebelling. And then junior year, looking back, I had undiagnosed anxiety, but back then it was skipping class. And I had the choice to either get it together or go to another school to do my classes in a semester instead of a year.
Oh, okay. So wait, so you were skipping class because you were anxious?
Yeah. Looking back now, I think I was just really freaking anxious and miserable.
So they gave you the choice of get your stuff together or go to a different school and wrap everything up.
Yeah, wrap everything up in a semester rather than a year. So senior year, I only had to do a semester, and then I graduated. And then the day after I turned 18, which was April 27th, I packed my stuff up in my car and I drove to Austin and moved in with my brother and his wife, newly married, which I still can't believe they let me do that. But And then from there, it was just, I took a year off I got a job working on 6th Street. Oh my gosh. Bartending. And so I did that, and again, really kind of got introduced into the real party and drug scene, and found myself dating a guy, and then a couple months in realizing he was a drug dealer.
Oh my gosh.
That's a whole other story. But basically the gist of it was I figured it out. Maybe I was naive. Not maybe. I was naive. I didn't really realize what was happening until it kind of was there. So that's when I first got introduced to like drugs. So like I did a lot of cocaine. We would do a lot of ecstasy, go to concerts, stuff like that. And then, you know, it always leads to harder stuff. And so I got into pain pills. And that kind of erased 6 months of my life, to be honest. Nobody really knew about it. Parents didn't know about it. So that was kind of it. And then I guess after that boyfriend, I decided I was going to go to beauty school. So I went to beauty school. I met a guy there who's in the barber program. And he was a shy, quiet guy, really sweet. And we started dating. And then he turned out to be just, a sociopath, literally. Like he had in quotes, dark side. And so that took me 6 months to see. And by then I was so far gone into everything, I didn't even know who I was anymore. And I ended up being hospitalized for a week and then got out and realized I needed to get sober, and then partied for a couple more years, and then finally decided to get sober. And it wasn't until after I was baptized, a couple months into it, I decided to get sober. I've been sober 6.5 years.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I remember when you came to our life group, you shared that it had been like a year, I think, when you first started to our life.
Yeah.
I thought that was really special that you shared with us. But just backtracking a little bit, I think when it comes to like partying and like drug use and all of that, I think something that a lot of people don't realize, and you might have felt the same way, is how easy it is to get into that lifestyle. I mean, I remember you even told me that it's so easy to find drugs, like easier than people think it is.
Yeah, very.
So like looking back, I guess, like what are some signs that you wished you had looked out for, or like maybe some things you would like, some red flags where you're like, oh, maybe I should like avoid this person, or like, I guess, how can people like avoid kind of falling into that like partying lifestyle?
I think people, especially at 18, 19, 20, 21, like, I think people are really naive and they think, oh, I just do it on the weekends. I just do it to party on the weekends. But then what happens during the week when you get bored? Or your friend asks you, hey, you want to go grab drinks? And the drinks turn into Coke and turns into 4 a.m. going home. Like it's like a snowball effect. It like really does just take over. And like, I think a huge part of it is the people you hang out with. And I surrounded myself with people who work downtown. And so that's just what we did. And so it like normalized it.
Right. And you were in the service industry.
Yeah.
Like you were in that environment.
I know it sounds so cliche. Everyone was doing it. Like I remember going into shift at 6 p.m. The owner of the bar would take me in the back and have me do Coke before putting me out to do my shift.
Wow. Because it would make you like awake.
Yeah. And I'm like ready to go.
Wow.
Yeah. And so it was just so normal, in quotes.
Yeah.
And I think I wish I wasn't so naive thinking that this can just be a weekend thing or every once in a while thing, or like, because it quickly turned into an everyday thing.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And I think that's really wise. I've talked about that before, maybe not on a podcast, but with you and other people I've talked about like the idea of not trusting yourself so much.
Yeah.
And I think we all do it, right? We all think like, oh, I can handle this, I can handle that. But sometimes you really can't, especially if you do have anxiety or depression. I think it can be even easier to lean into drugs or alcohol or stuff like that to numb your anxiety and to deal with your depression.
Absolutely. Yeah.
It can kind of be a perfect storm if you have all of that going on within you.
And it's just such a, you drink and you do drugs so you can get numb from the feelings. And then you stop doing it and all the, you're like, why am I so anxious? Why am I so depressed? It's like, well, I'm not that way when I'm on drugs or drinking. So might as well just stick to that because it is easier to not feel right and have a good time and be the party girl and like, do it for the plot, staying up till 7 a.m. and then having to go to work at 8. Like that life just became so normal to me. And so it wasn't until I was hospitalized that I realized like how I'd just been slapping a Band-Aid on a gun wound, really.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's really powerful and really important. And I remember you shared one time like a really poignant example of when you realized like, yeah, partying and drugs isn't for me anymore. Like you were at a particular party where you had this moment of clarity and you're like, no, I'm not doing this anymore.
Yeah, we were out on 6th Street. We went to an after party and there were 2 plates of white powder that they were passing around. And one of them was Coke and I did a line of Coke and then they handed me the next plate and I was like, I don't know why. Well, it was definitely a God thing. Excuse me. But I was like, wait, what is this? And they told me, oh, it's GHB, the date rape drug. But you just do a little bit of it and it feels like you're on ecstasy.
Wow.
And I put the plate down and I walked out. I went to bed that night and I woke up and never touched drugs again.
Wow.
I was like, I dropped all of those friends. I deleted numbers. I blocked numbers. I sat in my studio apartment for probably 6 months and did not go out because that's the only way I had power over it. And Rachel, of course, she's my best friend and she, that's how we became close. She sat in my studio apartment with me every weekend night when I didn't want to go out. She would stay with me. And so that's how I got sober from drugs.
Yeah. And I think that's huge too. Like just taking all the steps that you took of like deleting numbers, blocking people, not going out. I think a lot of people don't realize too that, you have to go to great lengths to walk away from that kind of lifestyle.
Yeah.
Like I know some people think they can still hang out with the same friends, they can still go to the same bar, they can still whatever, but it's just so easy, I'm sure, to just get sucked right back into that.
Yeah, it is. And like, I mean, even to this day, if I go out, which is like 3 times a year, I run into those people and they're doing the same thing they've been doing since I was 18 years old.
Wow.
That was 11 years ago.
Wow.
They're still at the same bars. They're still staying up till 7, 8 a.m. And they'll ask me, they're like, hey, you want to come to this after? No. I know my limit. I know my boundaries. And I'm confident in that now that I wasn't at the time.
Yeah. Yeah. So backing up a little bit, you mentioned that before you went to that party and had that moment of clarity that made you want to get sober, you had like a brief stint of being hospitalized. And if you're okay with it, I'd love for you to maybe share about that time a bit too, because again, I think a lot of Christians have stigma around mental health issues. As we know, there's a lot of stigma around having to check yourself into places like that to get the help that you need. And I know you've shared with me that God really showed up for you during that time. So I'd love to hear more about that part of your story.
Yeah. So while I was, so I had my first panic attack that I realized what it was when I was 19 and went to the ER because of it. And they gave me a Gatorade and like asked if I was going to kill myself and then like sent me home.
They're married.
Yeah.
I am in about.
So I was like, cool. And I was like, well, it doesn't happen when I'm doing drugs and partying. So I'm just going to keep that up. So I kept that up. And then beauty school, met the guy. Some just horrific, traumatic things happened. And I was done. It was the low of the low. I had like a plan on how I was going to end my life, and I was just ready to go. And my parents were like, you need to see someone or we're going to stop paying your rent. I was like, oh, shoot. Okay. So I actually met a therapist at the cosmetology school. She gave me her card, and I just randomly called it one day. And she got me in, and I saw her today. Like she's been in my life since that day. And I sat down on her couch, and I was just like 109 pounds,
just like a shell of a person.
Oh my God, a shell of a person. And I told her what was going on, and she was like, okay, I'm admitting you. And I was like, what? And she's like, you aren't safe.
Right, because you expressed to her, like, you think to yourself and all of that.
Yeah.
I was like, you are not safe right now.
Yeah, she's like, we need to get you somewhere safe. So my dad happened to be in Austin, which is wild, total God thing. And so him and my brother Mark picked me up from the counselor's office and carried me into this psychiatric ward, and I was there. In the first 2 days, I was just like miserable and pissed and defeated and, still pretty suicidal. And, I just rock bottom basically. And, I feel like, there's a Bible there, and God really highlighted John 13:7, which is, you do not understand now what I'm doing, but someday you will. Mm. And that just was like a light switched on. And I was just like, this all sucks and this is hard and I'm miserable, but like God is still good. Like he's meeting me in the darkest place. And then I realized if I want to get out of here, I got to get better. So I took my meds. I did all the classes, yada, yada.
Lied with everything.
I put a smile on my face. I was like, get me the hell out of here. And it was eye-opening because I look around at these people. A ton of them are homeless. And none of them have family or friends. And I was the only one that had visitors every day at lunch. My family would come. I was the only one with visitors.
Wow.
I was the only one whose people would answer the phone when I called them at night. Like, it was so eye-opening, so many different levels.
Yeah.
And then, I got out and was on medication, and I was still with the guy until another traumatic thing happened. And I finally got out, and for a long time didn't share with people that I had gone through that because I was embarrassed. And you see on the movies like psych wards and like crazy people, and it's like, no, it's for anyone could end up there, really. And I'm not even saying that it was the best thing for me, because I'm not really sure looking back. But it did what it needed to do, and I'm here today because I went through that process. And to get out, I had to do an outpatient program, which was 5 weeks, 3 days a week, 4 hours a day of group therapy.
Wow.
Yeah.
A lot.
It was a lot. And I would show up high. I would be there, but I was usually stoned or, even hungover, whatever. I had quit the hard drugs around for that time, just because I was on so much medication and stuff.
Right.
yeah, like I said, it's just God met me in that place. And so I'm grateful for it. And I wouldn't be where I am today without having that experience.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think that's such an encouragement because I think it shows that healing can sometimes be messy. And I think people forget that. People think, oh, I'm going on this healing journey and it's going to be great and easy and comfortable, when you really had to do the hard work, like you said, of going to that hospital, going to those therapy sessions, complying with whatever they asked you to do, not having up a fuss, and that's hard when that's not where you want to be. Obviously, no one wants to be there.
No, definitely not.
But so and the reason I love your story too is because it kind of shows that healing isn't always linear. I think a lot of people think it's a linear journey, but I think it's more like, peaks and valleys, ups and downs.
Yeah.
And so you shared with me that after you got out of the hospital, you continued to party. Mm-hmm. You broke up with that one crazy boyfriend.
Yeah.
Continued to party. When you say party, like, did you get back into the hard stuff, or were you just like drinking and like doing?
Yeah, I got back into doing coke. I quit messing around with the painkillers and the ecstasy. But yeah, coke was still a thing. And it took me like I was doing better, but I was not okay. I was functioning and I was surviving, but I wasn't thriving. That's what I think a lot of people think, like, oh, you still partied after you were hospitalized? Yeah. Like, I was still messed up. Like, it didn't just like fix it like that. And like, some people don't want to hear this, but like, I don't believe God healed me then and there for a reason. Like, I don't think that all my problems, if my problems just disappeared in that hospital room, what's my testimony? Like, I have this like testimony now of like how God changed my life, and it took years and years and years. And I'm okay with that now.
Yeah. And I hope that encourages people to, just like we were saying, like, healing is a journey.
Yeah.
And yeah, a lot of people might think, okay, cool, I check myself into a hospital, I do all this, I check all the boxes, I'll be healed, I'll be fine. But that's just not the reality sometimes.
No.
And so I think it's very honest of you to share that, like, yeah, you still went back to party, you still went back to hanging out with the same old people, the same old crew, and all of that. But then you had that night at that one party where you had that moment of clarity where they were passing around movies and everything.
Well, I partied for like another year or so, started going back to church randomly, and I would show up hungover, looking like crap. And every once in a while, I would bring one of my friends from the night before, my friend Taylor. I was like, come to church with me on Sunday. She's like, go out with me Saturday. I'm like, deal. So I'd figure it out, but I would get there, and that was like a huge turning point of like feeling God again, and like knowing like this isn't all about like me just facing it on my own. Like, I have demons, and like we serve a God that loves us and cares for us and who's faithful, and he never gave up on me. And so why would I give up on him? And so I went through, I was definitely partying less, but I was still doing it. Like, I hadn't fully gotten sober out of that like situation. And then I decided to get baptized. So I got baptized. And like a week later, I'm doing cocaine. And I was like, what is wrong with me? And I still did drugs and drank for another 4-5 months after being baptized, and like having this like total God moment, like in church. And like, I still found myself there. I was just like, and it took that party, and I think God was kind of like, okay, I'm done waiting. Let's wrap this up, Elena. Like, it's time to move forward in your journey. So I had that moment. at the party and never touched drugs again.
That's amazing. And I mean, again, thank you just for your honesty and sharing that too. How even though like you started going to church again, you would party on Saturday night, go to church Sunday morning, you know, go up hungover, fresh out of partying, but you still went. And I think a lot of Christians feel like they can't do that anymore. Like once they have sinned and messed up and done things they regret the night before, they think, well, how can I walk into a church? How can I go and ask for prayer? How can I go and sit through a worship service? But I love that you just kept showing up.
Yeah, that's exactly where God wants you to, is like, he wants to reach you and he wants you to not give up. And I think that's what Sunday mornings after Saturday nights really taught me, was kind of like I said, like, he didn't give up on me. I don't want to give up on him.
Yeah.
I found myself there.
Yeah. And I love that way of looking at it because, again, I feel like so many people shy away from going to church after they made mistakes and messed up and stuff like that because they blame themselves. They feel a lot of shame. They feel a lot of guilt. But I love how you just focused on your love of God and that motivated you, where you were like, yeah, he hasn't given up on me. I'm not going to give up on him.
Yeah.
My life is going to be a response to his love, a response to his sacrifice. And I'm going to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep showing up to church.
Yeah. Whether I liked it or not.
All right, so Elena has shared her story. She's taken us through kind of the peaks and valleys of her healing journey, which I love because, again, it shows that healing is not a linear A to B kind of journey. So now I would really love for you to share like just how you kind of let go of the past, because I struggle with feeling forgiven for past mistakes or past regrets. And I know that's a very common thing in Christian communities. We kind of tend to beat ourselves up for the past. So how did you kind of find freedom and healing to just let that go and walk in the truth of what God says about you?
Lots of Jesus time. Yeah, I think, and my therapist helped a lot with this. So everyone go to therapy. It's wonderful. But just combating those thoughts and those fears and the shame and the guilt with like God's truth about what he says about you and how he feels about you. And I mean, it sounds cheesy. It's like anytime a thought would pop into my head, I'd literally say out loud sometimes, no, that's not what God says about me. And like, you know, learning scripture and I'm not some like girl that sits every morning and reads her Bible and talks to God for 2 hours. It's not that. Trust me, I'm not like that. But I had to equip myself with things that were going to remind me of who I am. So I think that's really important. It's like the enemy lies and wants you to feel isolated in your past, and God is the one that's looking towards your future and like who he's created you to be. And you know, you don't feel like it in the time, but like it does get better. Even if it's a centimeter better, it does get better. So yeah, I think I just reminded myself a lot and kind of just tried to change my thought patterns to be a little bit more positive, which to this day, you know, I sometimes struggle with it too. Even though I'm in this amazing, loving relationship, and like with my fiance, we've got such a good relationship where I've realized, I was telling you this earlier, like I realized like, oh my gosh, I do have freedom from my past because I haven't thought about what if he doesn't love me? because when he finds out this? Or what if he doesn't really love me? He's just like here because he feels bad. And like all of those, thoughts, like I realized how little I had of them. And I was like, I think I'm finally being set free from my past of like, you're not good enough, you're not worthy enough, no one will ever love you. And I'm not saying that as like, once you find your husband, like all that will go away. I'm not saying that at all. I will say though, before I met him, there was about 5 months where I was like, did not talk to any guys, did not go on dates. I mean, you remember, I was like, nobody talk to me if you are a male, because I'm focused and I was just spending time with Jesus and like really trying to prepare myself for my future husband. And, timing worked out and it's great. But, I think, and it's hard to hear this when you're in it, but it takes time. And it takes a relationship with Jesus to really combat those lies and walk in the fullness and the freedom that God has for you.
I love that. And this like observation just came to me while you were like sharing your story, that it just seems like throughout your life, you have really taken time for yourself, and you have really been kind to yourself. And I feel like a lot of people don't do that.
Yeah.
Like a lot of people don't take the time to go to a hospital if they need to. A lot of people don't take the time to look for a therapist, let alone sit in a therapy session every month. I'm sure you started with Nicole every week. But yeah, I think that's a huge part of your story too, is that you just made time for yourself and you made yourself a priority.
Yeah. And I think maybe I didn't get that when I was younger. So maybe that's why I like really tried to make time for myself. I think a huge thing, what you kind of said, was being kind to yourself, because someone who struggles with anxiety and depression, it's really easy to be unkind to yourself. And it's like, and again, this is another cheesy thing that I swear by, talk to yourself the way you would talk to your best friend.
You've told me that before.
Yeah, because it's like, why, you would never call your best friend ugly or stupid or pathetic or fat or,
or
worthless.
Yeah.
Like you would never say that. So why are we saying that to ourselves? And it's like,
amen.
Like, why are we doing that to ourselves? Like, and just like reading some scripture here and there too, of just like what God says about you, because that's, at the end of the day, that's what really matters. And yeah, I think it took me a long time to be kind to myself, for sure. And it's still a struggle. Like, I'm not saying that all of this is like, I'm healed, I'm better now. Like we've talked, like, it's not that I'm like, okay, I'm good now. It's a daily thing to try and walk in freedom and kindness for myself.
Yeah.
And some days are better than others. And some days I need you to tell me, and some days I need my fiance to tell me. And other days I'm like, I can tell other people and pour into other people about it. So it doesn't turn into rainbows and butterflies. I'll say that, but it does get significantly better.
Yeah. Because I mean, I remember like, you had a tough summer, like over the summer was pretty rough. And again, I loved that you just took time for yourself and you were kind to yourself. You let people in, you meditated on what God said about you. And yeah, I mean, I think this might sound discouraging to people, but I still struggle with anxiety and depression after going to therapy. You still struggle with both of those things after going to therapy. And I saw this video the other day. I think I might have sent it to you. I can't remember. But this pastor was talking about, it was called like the Mountain of Healing. And he was talking about how a lot of people, when they read the verse of like, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, move, and it'll move. And this pastor was like, well, what if your mountain doesn't move?
Yeah.
And he talked about how your mountain is not your healing. It's not getting over depression. It's not getting over anxiety, but it's, what do I do even if I'm not healed?
Right.
What do I do even if I still live with anxiety, if I still live with depression? And I love that, your story is one of just continuing to move forward, not just put one foot in front of the other, you know?
Yeah, like, I know we've talked about this, about healing and stuff. Like, you know, there's a big chance that I don't get healed from my anxiety and depression this side of heaven. And like, it's taken me years and years to kind of be okay with it. Like, I'm not even fully okay with it yet, but I'm kind of okay with it. And like, you know, like this summer was an episode of just my panic disorder was just revved up and, you know, couldn't drive, didn't really leave the house much. And I'm on the other end of it slowly. But that summer doesn't take over all the work that I've done. And it doesn't mean that I'm any less to God because I had a really hard couple months. And it felt like during the time it was step backwards, but it was really just like, it's just part of my journey. Like, it's not going to go away. You know, I pray that God would heal me this side of heaven, but that's, you know, that might not be true. And so I have to be, and we've talked about this, like, we have to be okay with our struggles and them not just like going away because we've done a lot of work or like taken enough meds or seen the therapist enough or prayed enough or read my Bible enough. And so that's something I'm actively working on.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Because it's hard. It's a tough pill to swallow. But I think at the end of it, like, I just try to remind myself, like, God is good and faithful and true, no matter what happens in my life, no matter if I'm healed on this side of eternity or not, because in the midst of my pain, in the midst of my trauma, in the midst of my anxiety and depression, God has already met me in so many places. Like with you, he met you in the hospital, in like one of the lowest peaks of values of your life. Yeah. And that's the goodness of God, you know, that he shows up even in the darkest, lowest moments. And so even if I'm not healed on this side of eternity, just the fact that God keeps showing up in my life and lifting me out of those dark moments is enough.
And I think like my biggest advice to people is like, for so long, I was ashamed of my testimony and my story and my past that I just let it eat me up and I never shared with anyone. And the second I started sharing it with people and being vulnerable and showing them, you know, the icky parts, like, it was crazy how God moved. Yeah. Like, the enemy wants you to isolate and to feel shame and guilt, but that's what the cross did. God, you know, sent his son to take that away from us. And so I want to live my life sharing my testimony and my story to people, especially, you know, Christians who feel like they can't have a past like theirs, or they're not good enough because they're a Christian, but they struggle with anxiety, or they're a Christian, but they've had suicidal thoughts, or, you know, and so it's like, the more I share it with people, Christian and non-Christian, it's crazy the responses I get, because 9 out of 10 times say, oh my gosh, me too. And it's crazy. And it's so cool to see what God does. And we end up in these long conversations over coffee or a drink, and like, you just learn more about this person that is just sometimes even just so lost, and you get to share Jesus with them, which is so cool, you know?
Yeah. Like, I think of that verse that says, I can never remember verses.
Yeah.
I'm not Christian. That's like somewhere in the Bible. It's
somewhere in the Bible.
Something about,
yeah.
But there's that verse that says, you know, it is for freedom that you have been set free. And I think about the phrase, like, we are set free so that we can set others free.
Yeah.
You know, like, you were set free from all of that bondage and all of that shame and all of that guilt, and you're still working through it. But for the most part, you were set free from all of that so that you can set others free. Yeah. You know, you're not afraid to share as you are on this podcast, because you know that it'll free other people, and you've already been set free from that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's my advice, is just don't be ashamed of your testimony. Like, God knew all of this was going to happen.
Yeah.
And just walk in freedom and know who you are is because God made you the way that you are. The good, the bad, the ugly. Like, he doesn't he doesn't care about that. He just wants your heart and your story to glorify him. So that's my advice.
I love that. Yeah. How do you, kind of piggybacking off of that, how do you think that people can make like more space to have these hard conversations in, Bible studies or life groups, or, how can, like, if any Bible study leaders are listening, how can they kind of cultivate like a space where people can feel free to talk about the hard stuff?
I feel like the best thing to do is one-on-one time. I mean, that's how we became friends.
Yeah, we had a lot of, one-on-one time.
One time. And it's like just opening a safe space to be, not come off it as like holier than thou. I'm better than you. I'm a leader. So, I'm going to tell you. Yeah, that's why you. And just praying before you walk into a situation like that, of just being like, God, if this shocks me, please don't let my face say it. Or like, give me wisdom on how to love this person, or, how can I show them your love today as we talk, just opening up a conversation with the Holy Spirit of like, how can I love this person even when their past looks different than me? I think a lot of Christians have a hard time with that, where, there's a lot of cookie cutter situations, but then when you really, I came from a Christian, Jesus loving Southern family, and we were messed up. And to this day, there's still stuff going on. And I think people, if they just opened up that conversation with people, even the people you think have this like perfect, shiny past, you'd be shocked at what they have to say.
Yeah.
I mean, we've met so many people where it's been
a lot.
It's been a lot. Yeah. Yeah. So I would just say asking the Holy Spirit to guide the conversation for sure. Yeah. Just opening up your mind to, this person may have a really different story than mine, but that's okay.
Yeah. Because we're all different, and it takes all types.
Yeah.
And yeah, I love your advice to make one-on-one time too, because, I've been a life group leader, you've been a life group leader, and, often we would break up into small groups, like when the evening would wind down, after the main Bible study session took place, we would break up in small groups to pray for things. But people don't want to go that deep when other people are just sitting like right across the living room or in the kitchen or whatever. So I love your idea of inviting people out to one-on-one time where they might feel more free to kind of talk about harder stuff when it's like you and them. And even inviting them to like a safe place like your home or their home.
Yeah.
I feel like the tendency is like, oh, let's go grab coffee, let's go grab lunch. But I really like having people over to my house.
I used to have my girls over just to my house, and I cook them dinner, and we'd sit on the couch, eat spaghetti, and have a glass of wine, and get into really vulnerable conversations that turned out to be wonderful. So
yeah, because I feel like that makes such a safe space for people. Like, you're in a home, it's warm and cozy, and people just feel more free. It's just you, one person, so people feel more free to maybe open up about deeper stuff.
Yeah.
So I love that idea of like making room for more one-on-one time as a leader, or even as a friend.
Yeah, just as a friend.
Invite people over to your home for once.
Yeah.
Like, instead of grabbing coffee, instead of grabbing lunch, maybe surprise your friend and be like, hey, do you want to come over? And like, I'll cook a meal for you.
Yeah, I do it all the time.
Yeah, and I love that. I mean, we're sitting in my house right now.
Yeah, exactly.
And I love that because, I feel like it just opens up space for people to be more vulnerable and go a bit deeper than they would if they're in like a restaurant and people can overhear their conversation.
Yeah, I think people, and this may be a hot take, I think people crave to be vulnerable. I really do think that. I know a lot of people are scared to do it, but I think people crave to find someone that they can be vulnerable with.
Absolutely. Yeah, I agree. So I think to wind down this episode, I'd kind of love to just hear like your final thoughts. So I told you like something I use to kind of guide me whenever I record an episode is like, what did I want to hear when I was struggling through that kind of situation? Yeah. So if someone listens to this podcast and they're going through what you went through, maybe they're in the middle of a really rough addiction to something, maybe they're with a partner that they know they need to leave, that's not good for them, maybe they're on the brink of like a mental breakdown and they know they need to check themselves into somewhere or sign up to get therapy, like what would you say to that person?
You can never be far from God.
Mm.
You are never too far from God. I think God tends to meet people in the darkest and in the lowest of valleys. And I think that just says something really special about his character and how kind of a father he is.
Mm.
But there's literally nothing that can separate you from the love of God, just like in Romans.
8:38, we looked it up.
Yeah, 8:38. Yeah, there's nothing you can do that will separate you from God. And I think a lot of people, the first thing they do is, oh, I did this, and turn away from him. And then you just keep turning and you're just like, before you know it, you don't even feel his presence anymore.
Mm.
You don't have to feel it to know that he's with you.
Mm.
I mean, I found God in a hospital room. I mean, I was ready to end my life, and I found him, and I found him again at that party when I was about to do date rape drag, apparently. And
Yeah.
I found him,
In the midst of deep depression.
Yeah. I mean,
anxious nights.
yeah. I mean, this summer I found him even more, like I feel like each day I find him more and more. And so just knowing that he hasn't left your side, he's not going anywhere, and you can try your hardest, but he's like a best friend. He's not going to stop.
Amen. I love that. Well, thank you so much, Elena, for sharing your story. And I really hope that this episode encourages people who are just going through hard times. It's human to struggle. It's human to have hard times. So I hope that Elena's story will encourage you to take whatever steps you need to take to move forward in healing and growth. So I'm going to wrap things up here. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at lonewolvesclub.pod. And don't forget to rate and review. Elena, have you rated and reviewed?
I have not. Oh my gosh, I haven't.
We're going to do it right now.
Right now, I'm getting my phone out.
But don't forget to rate and review from whatever platform you listen to podcast on. I am on all platforms, including YouTube Music. So if you prefer the YouTube Music app, you can search me there, Lone Wolves Club, and I'll pull up. And you can also email me at lonewolvesclubpod@gmail.com. That's a great place to offer me feedback on episodes or leave me ideas for topics that you wish I would cover. All right, so this has been another episode of the Lone Wolves Club podcast. I'm your host, Nicole Porter. Thank you so much for spending a tiny part of your day with me. And until next time.